it's fun because, for years I had to grow covertly and grow underground. I couldn't talk about it. I couldn't share this information. I was still learning. So now I got an opportunity that under the federal guidelines, and I'm able to sit here and do this, as far as I understand anyway, to be able to sit here and to be able to help educate. And if this is going to help people learn to grow tomato plants or to grow their own peas or whatever, or most importantly to grow their own medicine, and so be it. That's what I believe that they have a right to. And the reason I say that is because all the way back here in Canada to Terry Parker, you wonder how we have, it wasn't because our country decided, or Health Canada in our country decided to be nice and say, hey, we're going to give you a federal license because, we just feel compassionate about the fact that cannabis works. It was because a Supreme Court justice said there was no grounds to say it doesn't work, okay? And the federal government is yet to give anything. But yet they challenge the 1 to 3 gram dosing issue. And this again is something that's new. They call our doctors and they say any more than 3 grams can be detrimental. And I say, based on what? And I challenge you now, based on what? My doctor challenges you, based on what? I have my license signed at 10 grams again this year. You didn't call him. You're not talking to me. In fact, half the time you don't answer my questions when I talk to the federal government. And this is another problem that we have here in Canada, is that with only 1,800 people, and let's just estimate, say, $30 million of taxpayers' dollars, you'll notice that I'm just going to go off base here again before I go back on that. As I get higher up the plant when I'm taking my clones, I always make sure that I implement different tactics. Like I said, some growers will go ahead and they will shave the sides. You might have noticing that I've been just kind of shaving down my sides. It's because there's less hormones. There's less chance of rooting. When you go up to the halfway point here, you're going to have a less chance of success. So that's where you might want to implement other tactics, such as slicing the center of the stem, or simply shaving down the sides like I'm doing here. Similar to shaving carrots, or if you've ever had your mom have to make you do carrots, then you know what I'm talking about. Similar process, you simply give it a little scrape. You don't want to spend too long out, and you certainly don't want to lay it on the table again. In water, dip, and get it into your pea pellet. Now back to Harper. So Canada spent $30 million on this licensing act, and I have to ask, why are 25,000 people accessing compassion clubs across this nation? And yet, we have only 1,800 people licensed. And all this money's been spent, but nobody's talking about it. Rather, the government continues to run ads about how we're lazy. I got a college diploma while I was doing this after being 7 years HIV positive and having a child, raising her by myself at that. So I went against my own trials and tribulations. For the government to say that somehow cannabis impeded that in some fashion, it didn't. If there's anything impeding me right now, it's federal policy. That's what's impeding my quality of life. Because I have to take time to fight like I am now to go out and to address you in this manner and to address stuff like Bill C-26, not because I'm going to be around to have to suffer any of those consequences, but rather my daughter is. This is a country of free peoples, as I understand it, and we are a free country to decide as we wish. And why we are even considering, we've allowed people to come over with Mr. Mark Emery, and we've allowed the Americans to get involved, and we've even considered extraditing our own citizens, for a few marijuana seeds. I think we have a few bigger problems in this country to look at. We got terrorism that want to blow us up and blow our kids up for the way we live. Not for anything else, but for the fact that we're free. And that's something that we should be focusing on, rather than we're sitting here worrying about the dangerous cannabis smoker. Dr. Keith Martin put it very well at a protest I recently attended. He said that as a doctor, he had never seen anybody attend a clinic that, where there was a person saying, well, the guy was on cannabis that attacked me, or that I acted out in a violent rage because I was on cannabis. This is something that doesn't happen. So, this is coming from one of our MPs, here in BC. And he's been outspoken before, and, this is logic. When have we heard of somebody saying, oh, well, I committed that armed robbery because I need more cannabis? I had to do it. Or I robbed that old lady, I needed more cannabis. That's not better served for other drugs. And unfortunately, other drugs are mind-altering and have a lot more control of the body. And that's where the reefer madness of old, and this is where Big Brother's lost the grounds of reefer madness. They ain't got it. Reefer madness is gone because the internet has leveled the playing field. You see, before, dissemination of information was impossible. We could talk town to town, rally to rally, and hope that we didn't get arrested, but we could never really unite as we do now, as And we just did. We united across the country in opposition to Bill C-26, which has nothing to do with just cannabis alone. I mean, this is bad for Canada, period, on any scale. I mean, when you're talking about mandatory minimums, you're talking about taking the judges right away to be able to say, and I addressed this already, mitigating factors. And that's not the kind of society that I believe we're moving more towards a police state, and that's something that personally I'm against. You know, like I said, I'm a patriot for this country, and I believe that this is just bad for the country, and that not enough people are talking about it. And whether that's media controlled by the conservative government, I don't know. But it doesn't seem to get a lot of media coverage right now. It seems like everybody's just letting this bill slip through quietly, and then it's just going to become law. And I'm really hoping that our MPs stand up, call on people like myself, call on others. There are lots of advocates across the country that are willing to speak out. There are lots of people that support us with this, and I hope that they speak out and do what is necessary to put an end to prohibition in general, but also to put an end to Americanization of Canada, because this is still Canada, and I want to keep it that way. And as long as we continue to allow America to influence us in any fashion. You know, Bush has lost his war, he's lost his war in Iraq, he's lost his war on drugs, his father's war on drugs, all this stuff. Well, this is the history, you know. Do we need to now write our own new history of Americanization? Or are we going to remain Canada? Because right now, crime rate's at its lowest. You know, people are doing fine. People aren't out committing crimes on cannabis. You know, and I believe that there may be some issues that need to be looked at, but certainly not in this fashion. There's harm reduction, and there's legalization or decriminalization. I mean, there's options on the table, but jail is not one of them. And back to just finishing off, I got 3 clones left to finish off here, and I'm done my political ranting. So back to the cloning issue, making sure that we understand all the stuff that was covered in between my bullcrap ranting, which I sometimes do, and you know, and the actual cloning. It's important to note that, again, right now I'm scraping the sides because it's the middle of the plant. It's optional. It's not something that needs to be done. We do dip